Let's take a second to talk about gear and live sound. It's true that the source material is what matters most when talking about anything creative, but as engineers, that's not always something we can control. Our job as live sound engineers is to make things happen as quickly and efficiently as possible so that the client has every opportunity to sound their best. If we're quick and engaged, it helps to establish a sense of trust between us and the band, keynote speaker, or whatever the hell it is. And that's where gear starts to matter the most. And this video is about the gear that's helped me become a more efficient engineer, like things that help me stay more organized, move a little faster, and streamline my workflow. Also, I can focus more of my attention on the client instead of fixing issues that I created with bad or cheap gear. I'd also like to point out that none of the companies that made these products sponsored this video. These are all just things I actually use when I'm working. Alright, so let's get into it. The first thing that's on the list is twin cables. These are Proco's version of them. I'm sure other companies make them, but these are the ones I like to use. They're an XLR cable combined with an Edison to IEC power cable, which means that I can run power and audio signal inside of one cable, which is pretty sweet. I use them for floor monitors and my mains, and I've never really had sound quality issues with these, but that's just my experience. I like to think of these as a way to streamline my setup and improve my mood actually, because setting up a bunch of active floor monitors for a band can be time consuming and frustrating at best, especially if you're the only engineer working the show, which I usually am. The process of setting up can easily turn into a mess of power and XLR cables, and twin cables help minimize those issues and clean up the mess. They keep me on schedule to stage tidy, and because I didn't spend a bunch of time running cables, I'm not super stressed out and hurrying to accomplish the next task, which I think in turn keeps my clients happier because they don't have to deal with a grumpy sound guy, which is never fun for anybody. These cables are a huge time saver and help me start out on the right foot when setting up for a gig. They'll save you some time and energy and give you more time to get to the important stuff like sound check and getting to know your clients. Next up is my Pelican case, or really just hard cases in general. Since I'm always traveling to get to my gigs, I need a bag or a case that can fit all my personal gear and tools into. And for the longest time that was a backpack. I used a JanSport backpack or this North Face backpack right here, but they weren't really the best choice for keeping things organized or for protecting my gear. I was always worried something was gonna break. Because if you're going from point A to point B all the time, your stuff's gonna get dinged up. It's just part of the job. Things get stacked on top of each other, dropped and dragged across the floor. It's how things go when you're constantly on the move. So it made sense to get something that was gonna protect all of my gear. I've got like 3 iPads in here. So I bought a Pelican. I got mine from Color Case, and they sell Pelican gear, and they all come in these really bright colors, which is obnoxious, but it's a good thing when you want your equipment to stand out in a dark room or just don't want somebody walking away with it. When it comes to cases, Pelicans just work really well. It protects everything inside of it, and it keeps me extremely organized. And after my first gig with it, it was obvious how much the backpack slowed down my troubleshooting process. Anytime I needed a tool or a specific cable, I opened my Pelican and it was right in front of me. When I used a backpack, I would have to go rooting around with a flashlight to find anything, and that's not good. There's other options for hard cases too, like Nanook or SKB. I use SKB cases for my microphones and wireless gear, and I absolutely love them. So if you haven't already, think about buying some hard cases for your gear. It's something that I didn't do when I first started, and I'm glad I do now because it's such a great investment. Next up on the list is my Super Cat 5 cables, and we can thank Dave Rat for this because I think his company makes them. This might be the most boring thing on the list, but after rolling out cheap shielded Cat 5 cables hundreds and hundreds of times, I realized that the frustration and time wasted wasn't worth the money that I was saving. I use these to connect my X32 to a digital stage box like an SD8 or a DL32, and the cheaper cables just don't uncoil and lay flat. And I hate to say it, but it's really that simple. Here's a closer look at both of the cables. They both have quality Neutrik components, so why spend more money on this purple one? These cables roll out the same as an XLR cable, and they're just as easy to clean up at the end of the night. It's just less frustrating. You can see the difference here. Here's a cheaper Cat 5 cable. See how it stays all coiled up? And here's the Super Cat 5, it lays flat. I know, but it's things like this that really get in the way of having a quick and efficient setup when you're out in the field, and I just wish I would have spent a little bit more extra money to buy equipment like this when I first started. Up next is the Radial ProAV2. And if you're running sound, you're eventually going to be asked to hook up a weird piece of equipment that wasn't on the rider, if you're even lucky enough to get a rider in the first place. So the ProAV lets me connect to unexpected or unusual pieces of gear without hauling around a bunch of cheap adapter cables. It's got 2 1/4-inch inputs, 2 RCA inputs, and a 3.5mm input, and those all get converted into a stereo balanced XLR output that I can feed to my console without any issues. I've used it on things like old turntables, laptops, and cheap little lamps that only have a 3.5mm output for some reason. This also works as a normal DI box too. I mean, for bass, keys, acoustic guitar, whatever. You know, these things are pretty sweet, and I'm probably going to end up getting a second one, and it's something that I just didn't know existed, and I'm glad I do now because it's really helped me. Up next is Mixing Station. About a year ago, I switched from the X32 Mix app to Mixing Station, and I can't believe I didn't do it sooner. I really wish I made the switch earlier, but I was comfortable with what I knew, and I didn't really want to learn how to use another app. But when I finally did, I honestly couldn't believe how much better Mixing Station was than the X32 app. You start with a blank canvas, which is a grid system that you can add whatever mixing component to it that you want. I can create any sort of button, knob, or fader that I want, have all sorts of custom layers and loadouts. I can have 16 channels in front of me instead of banks of 8. I mean, the list really just goes on, and it's completely customizable. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it's compatible with Allen and Heath, so I don't have to feel like I'm totally stuck in the Behringer ecosystem if I don't want to be, which is a big deal. Also, I'm not scared of accidentally updating my iPad, only to find out that the X32 Mix app doesn't work anymore. Logical? I don't know. Of course, it's a bit of a learning curve, but it was well worth the effort in making the switch, and if you're frustrated with whatever tablet-based mixing app you're using, look into Mixing Station. It's something I wish I did earlier, but I'm glad I use it now. Chauvet Flex Stands. There's been times where I've showed up to a gig and realized that my big speaker stands aren't gonna fit in the area I'm working in, or they're just gonna look bad and out of place. And when this happens, I like to use these Chauvet Flex Stands. They have a small footprint, let me work in extremely tight spots, and look a little bit neater than my tripod style speaker stands. These things are worth their weight in gold in congested areas, even if you're just gonna put a few lights on them. They're relatively inexpensive for what they are. I think they're about $250 at Sweetwater, but for that you get a 37-pound bass and 8 feet of trim height. They're super versatile and well built, and even if I'm not planning on using these, I still load them up in my van because I never fully know what kind of situation I'll be walking into on a gig-to-gig basis, and they don't take up too much space, so why wouldn't I? So if you're working small gigs, I would consider adding a pair of these to your inventory. They're super versatile and like a great thing to have with you in a pinch. The next item is caster boards. Here's a bold claim. My caster boards make my PA sound better. How is that even possible? Well, I used to take speakers out of my van one at a time and then put them on a hand cart, roll them into the venue, unload them, and then return for the subs to do it all over again. And it took forever for me to get everything inside of the venue. And when I made these caster boards for my speakers and subs, I suddenly found myself with more time and energy during my setup. I bought these off of Amazon, slapped some new casters and some D-rings on them, and they're ready to go. And now all my PA is on wheels. Is it elegant? No. But it gets the job done quickly, safely, and efficiently, and that's all that really matters. If I can get all my equipment into a venue quicker and with less physical effort, then I can have more time to set up microphones, run cables, ring out monitors, and ring out my mains if I have to. Really, it just gives me more time to address any unforeseen issues. And there's always annoying things that pop up in live audio. That's why we get paid to do this, to fix problems that clients don't know how to fix. I realize that most upper level systems all come with casters and road cases, but the lower level ones don't, so figure out a way to get some wheels underneath that stuff and you'll definitely be a happier sound guy. Antenna combiners and distros. One of the biggest mistakes people make when building their wireless systems is putting a bunch of half or quarter wave antennas really close to each other. Doing this can destroy the integrity of your system. When too many dipole antennas are set up too close together, they're going to interfere with each other, and you won't get the kind of range or coverage you expected out of your expensive wireless system. And to add to that, if you're putting your antennas on the back of the units inside the metal rack pointed directly at the stage, you're essentially pointing the null of the antenna at your receiver. It's just setting yourself up for failure further down the road. Yeah, this is an expensive piece of gear, but it's so worth it. An antenna combiner for a wireless IEM system with more than 2 units is an absolute must, and it's something that I regret not getting sooner than I did. This is going to take all of your IEM signals and combine them into one output antenna, which eliminates your antenna farm you got going on back there. And everything I just said applies to wireless microphones too. If you have multiple half or quarter wave antennas piling up in the back of your rack, you need to think about getting a distro unit. It'll pay off in the long run. And once I finally decided to buy one of these units, I had less interference and less dropouts. The next item is an Edgerouter with a Ubiquiti access point. We've all had those gigs where soundcheck goes great, your connection to the console was good, but after the audience settles in and the show starts, your Wi-Fi connection drops out. And this is the exact problem the Edgerouter and access point fixes. As it turns out, human bodies are pretty good at absorbing radio waves. It happens with IEMs and wireless mic systems if we don't place our antennas carefully and correctly. And Wi-Fi is really no different. The good news is, it's an easy fix if you know what to buy. A traditional tabletop router like this is hard to get above the audience head. It's possible, but it's a pain in the ass. But this access point router combo lets me put my antenna on a stick to get it above the crowd's head, which eliminates most of the connectivity issues while mixing a show on an iPad. And as an added bonus, the access point fits into my Pelican easily. One of the best things about the Edgerouter is that it powers the access point over Ethernet cable, so I don't have a mess of power cables running up my pole. That's pretty nice. I put off this purchase for so long because I didn't think I'd be able to get it set up right. I'm not a tech genius, but after a few hours of fiddling around with it, I was able to get it up and running. This system has fixed my connectivity issues and sense of anxiety of Wi-Fi going out at shows, and I feel very confident that I'll be able to mix at any show I have with this thing set up correctly. And it's really something that I should have done sooner, but I don't know, I was scared to do it.